Hey guys, in this video I'll be reacting to why a woman married a serial killer, the Nightstalker. That's what this video is about. Let's go.
In the balmy heat of a California.
Before the video start, I always wondered why these females be out here just marrying the serial killers while they in prison. That never made sense to me. So let's see why. Because I am so confused.
A summer night in 1985. The man known as the Nightstalker slides himself through an open window of a house. He walks into a bedroom room and fires his 25 caliber handgun 5 times into the body of a sleeping man. 3 bullets hit the man's head. One glances off his thumb. The other bursts the waterbed he's sleeping on. The Nightstalker walks into another room and grabs the man's girlfriend, binding her hands with the now dying man's tie. When she looks into his dark eyes, she swears she sees the devil incarnate. While hurting her, he screams over and over, "Swear, swear to me you love Satan. Say it, swear on Satan." As
Yeah.
he leaves the house, he growls, "Tell them the Nightstalker was here." Thankfully, this was to be his final crime. The Nightstalker, aka Richard Ramirez, was one of the most monstrous human beings the world has ever spat out. And yet, even after the sheer horror of his crimes became public knowledge, a woman married him and told the world that the person they were calling a monster was the man of her dreams. She once looked into a TV camera and said with the utmost.
Y'all, nah, I'm confused. I am convinced that these people have, they cuckoo. They need examination because you're not making no sense, girl. Nah, man. What do you mean the man of your dreams? You also have issues. Y'all both have issues. And y'all both need help. Nah. So seek therapy, please. I don't even think therapy is gonna help. I think y'all should just stay in a mental institution for a while and see if, it gets better or not. Because nah. And by the way, I did react to the story of the Night Stalker.
Most earnestness. I can't help how the world sees him. They don't know him like I do. To really understand just how disturbing these words are, and thereby how disturbed you will be by the time you finish this show, you need to know a bit more about his crimes. Serial killers come in all shapes and sizes, and not all of them enjoy inflicting pain on their victims while they're alive. Ramirez bathed in people's pain, and he got off having total control over them during the last minutes of their lives. He was what's called a sexual sadist, a person who enjoys inflicting pain on others for sexual thrills. He was also a narcissist who believed he was some kind of chosen one. As you can see in the comments he made after he'd been handed 19 death sentences, "You maggots make me sick. You don't understand me. You're not expected to. I will be avenged. Lucifer dwells in all of us." A judge who upheld these sentences
Nah.
described Ramirez perfectly, saying the killer exhibited cruelty, callousness, and viciousness beyond any human understanding. We imagine his wife-to-be heard that too. In fact, as you'll see, it's what very likely made her attracted to him. Ramirez could also fall into the category of a visionary serial killer, since he had lost all touch with reality. He believed he was in contact with the devil, which could have partly been down to not just his Satan worshipping, but also the fact that he'd sometimes stay awake for long periods of time while taking copious amounts of drugs. On top of that, he seemed to think he was fighting a worthy cause, cleaning up what he saw as a corrupt world. These kinds of killers are often called missionary types. These people have a mission, usually thinking they're taking orders from a higher power, such as God or Satan. Here are some more of Ramirez's words that make this clear. "I don't believe in the hypocritical, moralistic dogmas of this so-called society. I need to look beyond this room to see the liars, haters, the killers, the crooks, the paranoid cowards, truly trematodes of the earth, each one in his own legal profession." So this is the type of person that some women fell in love with. He was a demon, but his future wife saw someone who was damaged and needed to be nurtured. It is true that the trauma he dealt with.
You know what? Sometimes is in this life, you have to stop pitying people and start to pity yourself. And people are not objects. People are not toys. They cannot be fixed.
During his childhood shaped the man he'd become. His father didn't make his childhood easy, but young Richard had a few more markings of a future killer. He'd had 2 serious head injuries, he had seizures, and he might have seen his brothers being seriously hurt by a neighbor. Unloved, brain damage, traumatized by violence. This can turn out badly if there's a flame to ignite the fire. And that's where his
Yeah.
cousin comes in. Miguel Mike Ramirez. When Richard was 12, Miguel had recently come back from the Vietnam War, a place where he'd committed horrendous war crimes. There were a handful of men who'd been in wars and have come back killing, as if they'd acquired a taste for blood. For instance, the wife killer and fully fledged sadist Philip Jablonski said during his time in the Vietnam War, he and his fellow soldiers enjoyed taking Vietnamese soldiers up in the helicopter and throwing them out. We'll come back to Jablonski and his dark connection to Richard Ramirez later. His story will help us explain why not just one woman was in love with himself and Ramirez. He once told Richard having power over life and death was a high, an incredible rush. It was godlike. You controlled who lived and who died. About a year later, Richard was there when Miguel shot his wife in the head during an argument. Even though she
What?
died, he only served 4 years in prison due to the fact that the court heard he had PTSD after Vietnam. What's interesting is what Richard later said about going back to the apartment after the murder. He said, "That day I went back to the apartment. It was like some kind of mystical experience. It was all quiet and still and hot in there. You could still smell the blood." While Miguel served his time in prison, Richard started getting serious about a hobby he'd taken up. That was being a peeping Tom. His predatory urges then manifested into something uglier, something more physical, but he was not yet a killer. What's strange is that his high school friends back there, especially the girls, called him a gentle and sweet lover. As you'll see soon, psychopaths can often come across as very charming. He
Hmm?
later became a fan of heroin, speed, cocaine, PCP, magic mushrooms, LSD, and to get those things, he became a burglar. During this period, he attended Satanist meetings in San Francisco, where he said he felt the presence of the devil. At this point in the early 80s, he pretty much lost all contact with his family. His sister once remarked that when she saw him in 1983, he was living in a Fleabag hotel close to the LA bus station. At the time, he was regularly injecting cocaine into his arms. A year later, still in his early 20s, he crept into a woman's house at night and stabbed her to death as she slept. The violence the police knew had happened was so
Mm-mm.
brutal, they agreed that this was no break-in gone wrong. This was the work of a maniac. The victim, a woman touching 80, was almost decapitated. Ramirez was a disorganized killer, meaning he didn't seem to plan his crimes very well, or at least not all of them. He also left behind lots of evidence, which is a reason he should have been caught quicker. He was not, as criminal profilers like to say, forensically aware. In 1985, he went on a murder spree that securely places him in the infographic show Serial Killer Hall of Infamy. His MO was almost the same every time. He'd sneak into a house at night, often through an open window, and launch a frenzied attack. He'd shoot people, he'd strangle people, he'd mutilate people, but often he kept the women alive during the horrific ordeal he put them through. This man, who later became a dream husband,
Nah.
once
Guys, listen. Lock your windows and lock your doors. Because people are maniacs. They crazy.
used a spoon to gouge out the eyes of a victim. He took the eyes home after to keep as a souvenir. At the crime scene, he left
Mm-mm.
some evidence. There was a footprint of some Avia sneakers, not a common brand at all. It's a story we've told before, but the cops might have caught him earlier had the then mayor of San Francisco not accidentally tipped Ramirez off by publicly talking about the shoes that the cops were looking for. But that's not the
Big
story we want
mistake.
to tell today. What we want to know is why someone would marry a man who crept into old folks' houses at night and hacked them with a machete. Perhaps the women that adored him liked the fact that twice he showed some humanity when he left very young kids alive. But in general, he was monstrous. He once broke into the house of an elderly couple and used thumb cuffs on the disabled wife while doing things he liked to do. He shot the man in the face, which proved to be a fatal shot. That same month in 1985, Ramirez broke into the house of two women in their 80s. This time, he used a hammer, and he used it with abandon. Again, he did awful things, and in the end, one of the women died in the hospital from her injuries. He'd used this woman's lipstick to draw a satanic pentagram on the wall and one on her thigh. We think you'd get the picture by now. This was an evil man. He tortured and mutilated people and gained sexual satisfaction from doing so. As he held the women down, he often screamed, "Swear on Satan." As you know, he kept screaming about Satan with his last female victim. Her boyfriend, who he'd shot 3 times in the head, actually survived, but not without some serious injuries, including debilitating frontal lobe brain trauma. The woman he attacked also survived, but both victims were seriously traumatized for life. The man's mother had actually warned him the night before, saying, "Billy, keep your doors locked and your windows closed. There's a sick man killing people up and down the coast of California."
Hmm.
Everyone knew about who the press was calling the walk-in killer and the valley intruder and, of course, the Nightstalker. There were 18 victims, but the violence had been happening over such a short period of time. This was almost unheard of in the realm of serial killing. So much blood in so little time, so much unrestrained violence. By this time, the cops had lots of evidence to work with since Ramirez left clues and many of his survivors had seen the face of the man who told them to love Satan. Then, with the use of their new high-tech computer system called Cal ID, the authorities soon had their man and released a composite sketch of him. When that photo hit the newspapers, Ramirez was soon seen out in public. He could have been beaten to death by members of the public had the cops not arrived on the scene. It was over. The Night Stalker was in handcuffs and the public could breathe easy. Still, when folks learned about the full extent of his crimes, they were disgusted. Absolutely disgusted.
Very.
There was a media frenzy when Ramirez went to court. There, he wore black sunglasses on his smirking face, one time giving a two-fingered devil sign to the Satanists who were attending the trial. That's when he showed the pentagram on the palm of his hand. 6 women survivors identified Ramirez during the trial, and then, when the jury found him guilty, he said, "Big deal. Death always went with the territory." My God, was he hated. No human could have been more detested. But there was one person who felt very differently, and her name was Doreen Leoy. She started writing to Ramirez pretty much right after he was sent to death row. Believe it or not, she was just one of many women who wrote love letters to Ramirez, this man who'd bashed women's heads with hammers and mutilated them with knives, who'd hurt children
Mm-mm.
and grandparents, was popular, immensely popular with some people anyway. Leoy was educated too. At the time of writing to him, she was a freelance editor at a California based teen magazine. She wrote 75 love letters to him over a period of 11 years, and she was always first in line when she visited him in prison 4 times a week. The media soon got wind of this and asked
Pardon? 4 times a week? Oh no, she was on a mission. She was on a mission. Girl.
her why, to which she replied, "He's kind, he's funny, he's charming. I think he's a really great person. He's my best friend, he's my buddy." Then in 1996, she became his wife. He'd chosen her out of a long line of possible suitors. Prior to that, she told him that she'd buy them both gold wedding rings. Ramirez reminded her Satanists don't wear gold, so she bought platinum for him and gold for her. After the prison wedding, she smiled for the media and happily told one news program, "This is wonderful. I'm so happy. I'm so thrilled. Very proud." Some people called her crazy and a
Oh
shameful
yeah.
human being, to which she shot back, "I'm none of those things. I just believe in him completely." She definitely had a thing for celebrities. In the 1970s and 80s, she worked for a magazine called Tiger Beat, and part of her job was interviewing stars and future stars who had made Hollywood their home. One of those stars, the actor John Stamos, she'd helped make famous while he was entertaining people on the TV show General Hospital. When he was asked later about her relationship to Ramirez, he said, "To be that lonely, that this is the only man on the planet that she can find. I just thought, how horrible." But
Mm.
was it loneliness? Let's now come back to Philip Jablonski.
I don't know. I think something just like I said, I think something just is not clicking right in the head. You feel me? Still don't understand what was going through her head. I have my speculations, but I don't know what really was the issues that she had.
A man who might help us understand why this woman was so smitten with the Nightstalker. While Jablonski was on death row, also at San Quentin, he used to send letters to pen pals from all over the world. He'd often sketch cute but weird photos on the envelopes, so these two had a lot in common. Ramirez also drew sketches on his letters, with 2 different people saying on a web forum, "My friend also written to Ramirez. He replied to her letter and also sent her a drawing of Sailor Moon." The next person wrote, "He sent me Winnie the Pooh with his first letter." These guys did this to look innocent, but they also no doubt suffered from arrested development due to childhood trauma. Jablonski's childhood was nothing short of horrific, with his father and other men doing unspeakable things to him. Jablonski had a baby with one lover, who he later beat, stabbed, and strangled to death. He also had a history of
Mm-mm.
attacking other women. He then went to prison and found out a lot of women liked him. They wrote love letters to him, telling him he was misunderstood, that all he needed was true love. He married one of those women in 1982 while still in prison after she'd seen a Lonely Hearts ad he placed in a newspaper. Yeah, somehow he could do that from his prison cell. And then he got out after 12 years with good behavior on his record. He moved in with her and her mother in law, but before the year was up, he ended up killing them both. He suffocated.
No wonder. No wonder. And this woman keep sending love letter to this man. You just want your life to be over it. You don't love yourself enough because, girl, why do you think you're so special? I'm confused. He already killing everybody else. Why do you think he's not gonna do it to you? Be for real.
And stabbed his wife and shot her mother after a prolonged bout of violence. You could ask, did she not see that coming given his track record with women? Soon
Hmm.
after, he killed a woman and removed her eyes, writing "I love Jesus" on her body with a knife. He once said in a letter to a pen pal that he'd done that because she had a key ring that said "Jesus loves you." He said in the letter, "I wanted to show her how much Jesus loved her." And this was a popular guy. He killed again and was later handed a death sentence. But what's shocking is the fact that women still kept writing to him and some asked to marry him. When asked how this could be by one of his pen pals, he returned the disturbing reply, "Never underestimate the power of loneliness." He said if he did get out, there was no doubt in the world that he would kill the next woman he met, who would probably be one of those pen pals. He said that even though they knew he'd killed one partner and even killed a pen pal turned wife, the new one would think they could change him, and they knew him better, that they were special. After all,
Exactly. Why do you think you're so special? I'm not trying to be mean, but why? But what make you think that I'm special is not gonna do it to me, girl?
we all want to feel special, don't we? This is a huge part of why a very small group of women do this kind of thing. They just want to be loved, and it's highly possible they have been treated badly by a man in the past. Maybe they think that if they love someone who everyone else despises, this person will stay with them. But there is more to it than that. There is a condition called hybristophilia, which means someone finds someone who commits crime attractive, even the most violent of crimes. There are many reasons for this, but a lack of self esteem is a big one, as is someone thinking
Mm,
they can change someone,
makes sense.
that they're the special one, not like the others. They might also want to nurture a killer that they feel has never been nurtured before. Doreen Leoy once admitted that one of the things that had attracted her to Ramirez was his vulnerability. She knew all about his childhood trauma and she wanted to fix him. She was also probably quite happy to be in the.
Girl, it's not a project. You cannot fix nobody that don't want to be fixed. Feel what I'm saying? So stop it. I need people to stop. Just stop. Stop.
Spotlight for once being the focus of the news stories rather than the writer of those stories. Well, come to think of it, maybe the writer of this infographic story needs to be the one being talked about rather than that invisible man who's listened to on YouTube. Just kidding. Another reason some women might be attracted to vile men comes from an evolutionary psychology standpoint. Experts say some women might despise such men but can't help being attracted to them. After all, such killers might have been protective alpha males back when we were all hunting and gathering. The writer and forensic psychologist Catherine Ramsland, who looked into this phenomenon as much as anyone, added another very salient point. She said men behind bars can be the perfect boyfriend. All the women's experiences are positive. The love letters, the adoring partner, never having arguments, no housework. It's bliss, or it could feel like it in relation to crappy men she's dated before. There's none of that day to day stuff that sometimes makes relationships hard. The partnership in this case becomes a kind of fantasy, said Ramsland. All these things can make some women delusional, which is why there
Mm.
have been instances where women working as judges, psychologists, and even lawyers have fallen in love with extremely violent men. As for Doreen Leoy, we know from her father's obituary that she became Doreen Ramirez. Still, she split up with her imprisoned husband after 13 years when new DNA evidence showed just how vile her husband was. We won't go into the crime, but it involved a young girl. The Nightstalker never was killed by the state, dying instead from complications due to B-cell lymphoma in 2013. He was 53 years old. At the time, he was engaged to a female writer named Christine Lee. She was 23. This new girlfriend of his was involved in an ongoing fight with another of Ramirez's admirers, a model named Kelly Marquez. A 16-year-old named Ava was also madly in love with him, in part, she said, because he broke away from the system. Ramirez once said, "I think the girls are attracted to me because they can relate to me."
Child, this is crazy. This is some craziness going on here. This woman, I don't know what's going on. I just think maybe they do need some love. But I mean, girl, there's a lot of men outside prison. Why are you gonna go and look for the ones inside? Make it make sense. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.